Hello, welcome back to another episode of Scary Stories. On today's video, we'll be taking a listen to experiences that have been sent in from all of you. Now, as you listen, make sure to be watching the screen. In case you're wondering why there is a break from uploads, it was to get you all this awesome footage, which I'll go over more after the last story. So make sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let's begin. Number 1. 38 Special. Nothing really scared me in this world until I had this frightening encounter 15 years ago. At the time, I was 24 years old, and my girlfriend and I, now my wife, had been on a road trip across the United States. This was actually something we had planned for many years, but we were unable to accomplish it due to college. I recall we were somewhere in the deep south in the middle of nowhere, and we were heading to a rest stop that was advertised around 35 miles from our current position. Where we were at, it was nothing but farm fields and woods for miles on end. I must have been going easily over 80 miles an hour when both of us noticed something in the distance. I went ahead and let go of the gas, opting for the brakes, as our Toyota pickup slowly came to a halt. At the side of the road was a woman with a grayish-red Volkswagen minivan next to her. She proceeded to walk over to our pickup, and she told us her car battery had turned off. "Hi, would you be able to help me restart my vehicle?" I remember her expressing, with a blank, almost choreographed-like response. Now, for some reason, both my girlfriend and I had this very bad feeling. We actually almost considered just calling AAA from our car, since we did have a cell phone, and she of course said she didn't have one. Either way, I tell my girlfriend to lock the door as I make my way over to her hood. Something I should mention is I worked a lot on cars with my dad when I was younger, so I knew my way around vehicles. One of the obvious alarm bells was I could tell the car had intentionally been shut off. I don't even get a chance to say something, because before I know it, something terrifying happens. I hear my girlfriend scream as I watch two men walk out of the nearby woods, heading over to the passenger's seat, both of them having machetes. The woman suddenly takes out a syringe from her jacket pocket and she lunges, trying to grab my arm. Thank goodness her grasp wasn't strong enough, because I'm able to pull my arm away. I then start booking it back to my vehicle, but the two men with the machetes start to surround me. I thought this was going to be it for the both of us, but luckily we did have a saving grace. You see, any time we travel, I always have the .38 Special revolver that my grandfather gave to me that's in the glove compartment, something both my girlfriend and I were fully aware of. She wastes no time taking it out and fires a few warning shots. The three suddenly scatter and they run off into the woods. This was now my opportunity to jump back into our pickup. Fast forward 30 minutes later, and we reach a rest area with a McDonald's and a gas station. Now, within the safety of civilization, we phoned police and gave them a rough estimate of where we had encountered the three. Officers told us they would call back when they had more details, but we never did hear if they found them or not. Number 2. Rural West Virginia. I live in a home with my wife in rural West Virginia. It's very peaceful here, so much so it's not uncommon for us to leave our doors and windows unlocked. Neighbors are pretty much like family, and kids will be out until late in the evening. That's why our neighborhood was shocked after this happened. Now, this actually happened to my wife, but I'm going to go ahead and write this up for her. Thus, most of the story is from her perspective. It was a random evening in November, about 11 years ago, and I had been staying late at my job, finishing up some paperwork that was due at midnight. My wife, being a nurse, had come home earlier than I and was in the kitchen preparing dinner for my arrival. She tells me that around 7:45 p.m., she noticed that the back porch light had turned on. This porch light is automated, so it detects movement from animals and, of course, people. She went to look out the window, and she was able to see two figures just out of the porch light's reach. Now, we do have a trampoline in her backyard, and it was often used by the neighbors' kids, so she first assumed that's what was happening. However, She described these two figures were way taller than any of the kids in the surrounding homes. Therefore, she opens the window and she says, "Hello? Jimmy? Alex? Are you two out and about?" Jimmy and Alex were the neighbor's kids. She gets no response, and she watches as the two walk off the property and into the neighboring trees. Very strange, she thought, but again, she assumed nothing of it. A couple of hours later, close to around 10 p.m., I had called my wife telling her I would be home in about 30 minutes. She told me the food was waiting for me, and she stepped into the shower to pass some time. Well, some time did pass, and she told me that as soon as she got into her bathrobe and into her bedroom, she heard footsteps coming from the living room. Obviously, she thought I'd come home, and she starts walking down the hallway. Thank goodness she didn't call out my name, because what she described was super creepy. From the cover of darkness in the hallway, she could see two men wearing all black with ski masks going through the drawers. She almost had a panic attack, but thankfully she remembered the shotgun we keep under the bed. When she returns with it, she manages to catch the two off guard. My wife tells them that if they didn't leave in that very moment, she was going to waste no time taking them out with a single blast. Both of them, grasping knives in their hands, suddenly drop some of her jewelry they had gathered, and they take off outside the front door. This is where I come into play. As I pull up into the driveway, I see two masked men storming out of our home and heading to a nearby vehicle. I'm pretty confused at this sight, but I more or less get an idea of what happened when I see my wife run out of the house with our shotgun. I was considering following the getaway driver and these two, but I was more concerned with my wife's safety. My wife comes crying over to me, and this was the point one of our neighbors, Robert, walks out of his home with his wife Allison. Robert is a retired police officer, by the way. Anyways, police launched an investigation, but they came up empty-handed. We still don't know who those two were, but they were never seen around our neighborhood again. Hello there, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. Before we continue, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank my channel members, Robbie, Bew, and our newest member, Kim. Thank you for supporting me and helping me make these videos. Honestly, I can't do it without your help. So if you'd like to check out my channel memberships, then make sure to do so. It's going to be right next to where it says subscribe. From here, you've got some options for some cool and exciting perks. Anyways, let's continue. Number 3. Snorkeling trip turns disastrous. To preface this story, I'll let you know I'm female and I'm 20 years old. However, this event I'm going to recount is from back when I was roughly 14 years of age. It's during this time I was on holiday with my family in the Philippines. Now, I'm half Filipino, half Australian, and I can understand some Tagalog. However, since I did grow up in Australia, I mainly spoke English. Please remember this detail, as it comes into play later on. On one of the final days of the vacation, my family and I decided to check out this very popular place known as 100 Islands. This is where my frightening encounter happened. Now, I was fairly tall for my age, standing at an estimated 5'6". I believe this, along with looking older, is what made me a target for creeps. Moving on. Myself and my siblings decided to take a break for a lunch by doing some snorkeling. Meanwhile, my parents were busy preparing our favorite meals. I don't remember why or when exactly it happened, but before I knew it, I was snorkeling all by myself. I want to say between 5 or 10 minutes later, I resurface from the pristine waters below, and I see/hear a man to my side that's talking to me. I would describe him in his late 50s, and from what I could see, he had been sitting in the water. Now, it wasn't too deep where I was, which explained his relaxed, kick-back-looking nature. Not wanting to be rude, I say in English, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Could you repeat that?" Kind of dumb looking back on this. Anyways, He responded to my rebuttal with a surprised expression. I felt embarrassed seeing that in my clumsiness, I had spoken to him in English, as opposed to the native Tagalog.
Wow, your skin. It's so silky, smooth, almost like a cream if you would.
Bear in mind, he spoke in broken English. This is the part where you might be thinking, the man is just trying to be nice. After all, when you're on vacation, the last thing on your mind is having some creep trying to take you away or something worse. Trust me, I thought nothing more of this man, but the insignificant conversation turned into an uncomfortable one moments later.
You wouldn't happen to be married, would you?
No, I'm not, I reacted with a sense of annoyance. You would think this was the part the man was like, oops, my bad, don't want to mess with that. He, however, seemed overjoyed and filled with a sudden happiness, almost like when you've been looking forward to something and then finally get it. This was my sign to be on my merry way as I give him a farewell.
That boy over there, that's my son. His name is Giancarlo.
He exclaimed with a reassuring tone, pointing to a teenager around my age.
I want you to marry my son,
He said with a creepy deep voice. It's now I had briefly forgotten about his if I was married question. From what I could see, he wanted to introduce me to his son. I laughed, thinking this was some sort of joke, but then I noticed he started to look me up and down while licking his sun-kissed chapped lips.
Let's hang out here for a little bit longer. I'd love to get to know you better.
I was starting to get uncomfortable, and I recall fighting back tears of fear. Suddenly, the man grabs my arm, and he begins pulling me toward a nearby boat. Adrenaline is all but pumping through my veins, and my fight-or-flight response kicks in. Thankfully, I was able to slip out of his grasp. Finally, when I think I'm at a safe distance, I look behind me, and I notice this guy was way shorter than me. But that's not all. The guy was fuming with anger. His hair had become drenched in salt water after he had fallen back from my sudden reaction. But no worries. Time to find my parents, I thought to myself, and finally bring this creepy encounter to an end. I just wished that was the end. But it was about to become quite tragic, and that's not a joke. After I was on the mainland, I get into the car, and I was able to see that the man and the son were looking at me through the window. Since my family was still grabbing drinks and other goodies, I decided to stay with the driver, considering I was exhausted. Nevertheless, I gasp, and I try to tell my driver about the two. However, my Tagalog isn't exactly advanced enough to know all the vocabulary. This language barrier, so to speak, made my panic movements and pointing at the two people outside quite bizarre. But just when I thought things would turn for the worse, I was able to see my dad approaching with some drinks. The two, seeing their cover being blown, take a step back, and they head into another vehicle. When my mom arrived, the driver explained the weird things I just told him, at least the little parts he understood. Therefore, my mother told the driver to be extra cautious of that car. A bit later, we were driving, and I happened to look behind us at a busy cross-section. Following us was the same vehicle. We were able to cross just fine, and I did happen to notice the vehicle in pursuit about halfway through the intersection. By the time I looked away, I ended up hearing a loud crashing sound. We ended up stopping to see what had taken place, but I wish I never looked back. I have to tone these details down because it's too gruesome to describe exactly what I saw, but I'll summarize things by saying this. Sure, the guy was potentially trying to take me away with him to do who knows what, but the last thing I would have wanted was for something so terrible to happen to him. What are your thoughts? Number 4. Alleyways and Knives. I live in northern England, and I go to university. I also happen to live in an apartment that's literally right across from said university. The reason why I'm emailing you is so you can read my creepy story for one of your videos. Here we go. Since I do live in an apartment, I happen to share a living space with two other girls. We will call them Amber and Emma. We each have our separate rooms, and for the most part, we rarely see each other. This is mainly due to our work and school schedules. On the rare occasions we have free time, normally Sundays, we will go out shopping or head to the movie theater to catch the latest release. This Sunday, however, we were watching a WWE pay-per-view, seeing as we're huge wrestling fans. Now, Amber and Emma were going to go get the pizza we had ordered. Meanwhile, I was going to go ahead and set things up, i.e. get the cups, napkins, forks, and chairs ready. Now, because of the time zone, WWE pay-per-views don't air here until after midnight. This would mean no normal person should be out and about, correct? I thought so too. Fast forward about 15 minutes since Amber and Emma left, and I went to the kitchen and tried to throw some trash away. Of course, our trash was full. Therefore, I head outside so I could throw things away in the dumpster. Everything was going smoothly as I walked downstairs and head into our back alleyway. That's when I happened to hear footsteps. For some reason, I thought it was my friends, since again, it's past midnight and most of the people who live here are asleep by this point.
Hey, do you happen to have some spare change, miss?
A disgruntled voice called out to me, as a silhouette soon turned into a shape of a person. Before I knew it, there was a man medium built, no more than 175 centimeters, standing in front of me with a creepy smile. "No, I don't have anything. Sorry," I lied to him as I hurled the trash into the dumpster and started a quick-paced walk back to the apartment. It's at this point I assumed the man was just going to walk away, but before I turned the corner, I happened to see him just a few feet from me. He had now revealed he had a pocket knife in his hand, and his true motive had seemed to have manifest. Like a flip of a switch, adrenaline sent me packing as I run up the stairs, creep in pursuit. When I reached the top of the staircase, the man ended up tripping about halfway. The man then struggles to get back up, as meanwhile, I slammed the door shut behind me, heart racing and hands shaking. 10 to 15 seconds later, an argument breaks out, in which I recognize one of the voices. It was my neighbor, Stu. Stu is a martial arts instructor who I've been living next to ever since I first moved here. Curiosity was now telling me to open my door, and when I do, the creep from just a few moments ago is running down the stairs. Meanwhile, Stu is just standing there holding his arm. I went ahead and explained to Stu what happened, and he told me the crazy man had come at him with a pocket knife. Stu showed me the cut he had on his right arm, which thankfully wasn't anything too serious. Police caught the guy 15 minutes later, in which it was determined he had been drinking excessively at the nearby bar. Why he acted up the way he did is still something I think about to this day, but I'm glad he was put behind bars, in which I hope he never bothers me or anyone ever again. Number 5. The Creep of Anchorage. This happened in winter of 2014, when I was 18 years old. I remember it was right after basketball practice, and I was hanging out with a few of my friends in the school cafeteria. We were wasting time until our parents would come pick us up, and one by one, my friends started to leave, until it was just myself. Now, for some reason, my mom was taking way longer than she usually did. I got my answer just a short time later. As she explained, her boss had kept her in late because of a deadline they were so close to missing. By this point, it was close to 7 p.m. Mom told me it would take her at least another hour to get to me. Thus, I figured I would just go ahead and walk back home on my own. It was roughly a 20-minute walk back, but luckily there were some stores along the way. Oh, did I forget to mention the location? This is in Anchorage, Alaska. During the winter, it was easily in the single digits, which would make the walk back home that much more inconvenient. Something else I should mention is my parents were separated, and there was no way I was going to make my dad drive 3 hours just to pick me up. Also, I didn't want to be a bother to my friends, though looking back, I should have either waited for my mom or bugged one of my buddies. But I digress. I began the walk back home in the dark, choosing to pass by a gas station to get some hot chocolate. It's here I started to notice something a bit odd, and it wasn't the smell of the nachos. There was a man who was continuously staring at me ever since I got in. Only reason I'd become aware of his menacing glaring eyes was because the cashier thought he was my dad. Wait a minute. So, you aren't his daughter? No, I'm not. I have never met him in my life. Well, that's really strange. When you got in here, the man came up to me and he told me that you were his daughter. I couldn't believe in the 10 minutes I chose to walk around the aisles trying to warm up, this guy was already devising a plan that I'm pretty sure to this day was to take me away with him. Now, instead of playing into his so-called trap, I decided to play it cool by joking and saying out loud, "Wow, so you were in the Marines? My dad was in the Army. He'd probably knock somebody out if he got their hands on them, so I probably should get going." Saying this out loud to the cashier, making sure this creep heard me, he walked out of the store. I waited approximately 5 minutes, and then I decided to leave. Big mistake. I was now a couple of blocks away from my home, listening to some music on my iPod. I was trying to calm my nerves, but that's when I happened to notice headlights illuminating the street in front of me. Not thinking much more of it, I continue. But after 20 or 30 seconds, I've come to the realization the lights haven't passed me. In fact, I can hear the slow crunching of tires against snow approaching, almost stalking if you would. I take out my earphones, turn around, and to my disbelief, I am able to see the man from the gas station convenience store watching me from the driver's seat. I booked it down a nearby alleyway, being full aware there would be no way his vehicle would be able to fit. I was right, but that still didn't stop him from getting out and chasing me. No less than 15 seconds after I entered the dark passageway, I was able to hear his heavy breathing. The chase lasts for no more than 30 seconds, when, to my surprise, I was able to see a couple of police officers talking to a homeowner across the street I was currently on. I yelled as loud as I could, which thankfully the officers responded to. By the time I looked back, the creep had disappeared into the darkness. That wasn't for very long, however, as they found him no less than 5 minutes later. The scariest part was officers found a revolver and a knife in his trench coat pocket, which I'm assuming he would have used once he caught up to me. Needless to say, I never walk alone at night, and I now carry pepper spray and a knife. Number 6. Mysterious Creep or Hero Driver. Hi there, Creepy Fox. I'm a new fan of yours. My friend Bree was actually the one who introduced me to you. She's a super fan and she's watched all your content. I'm sure she can even recall which stories are in which videos. Anyways, I told her I would send in one of my stories, and here it is. One day, myself and a couple of my friends were staying over at my dad's house, which, side note, he wasn't staying there with us. Anyways, he lived out in the outback. I'm from Australia, by the way. Seeing as we're in the middle of nowhere, there's nothing but dry, rocky terrain. This meant there was no need to worry about our neighbors. I'm sure if this took place on a busy street, our shenanigans wouldn't be tolerated. Either way, we were listening to our favorite band, AC/DC, at full volume and having a good time. By 3 a.m., we were each starting to drift off to bed. However, we were suddenly spooked by a sudden thud against one of the walls. We spent the next couple of minutes listening, trying to see if perhaps someone had been walking around the property. Things settle, but then there's another loud thud. We were starting to get a bit freaked out. Now, I should note that there were a total of 5 of us, and we were all around 16 years old. We're normally brave, but I'll admit, I've never seen my friends as scared as in this very situation. I guess I shouldn't be one to talk, as I was sweating profusely too. Another few seconds passed. We hear the distinct indication of a person walking around the home. There was then another loud thud, followed by the sound of a pistol firing. My friends and I are thinking, this was it. Some guy was about to break in and shoot. But then there is a flash of light that we can see coming through the window, and we're able to hear running. My friends and I hugged each other tight, and we formed a circle of sorts until the light from a few minutes ago disappeared. Finally, myself and another friend grow the courage to look outside the window, where we can see a car drive away. We were safe, it seemed. We call our parents, and we tell them about our frightening experience, ensuring them we were safe. Now, even though it has been some time, I wonder exactly who drove away. Was it the guy roaming around the property, or was it someone that just so happened to be driving in the area that saw someone trying to get in? That's when they fired a warning shot, and the mysterious creep ran off, which was when we heard the running. We aren't too sure, and I think that uncertainty makes the whole thing that much more scarier. Number 7. The Creepy Neighbors. Just a quick note. This story is sort of long, and there is a lot of backstory, so please be patient, because I promise what I learned at the end made life even more scarier. Anyways, this happened just a few months ago. Here is some background context. My name is Jake. Obviously, that's not my real name, and I live in South Carolina. I have a brother and a sister who we will call Jason and Elizabeth, both aged 5 and 2 respectively. I also have 2 amazing dogs. One is an American pet bull named Ruby. The other is a border collie pet bull mix named Dottie. Under normal circumstances, the dogs wouldn't really be an important factor to my retelling, but keep them in mind as they're going to play a significant part. The last bit of context that I wanted to provide was I get really bad paranoia, and oftentimes I get anxious about the most mundane things. As you would expect, I go to counseling for it, and this is where we pick up the story, on one of my scheduled days to see them. As soon as I arrived home, the plan was to get my siblings ready. That way, my mom and I could take them along with us to my 4 o'clock appointment. While I'm helping them out, my dogs started to act a bit more crazier than usual. I was used to their shenanigans and their annoyance by this point, so I wanted to get outside before I went crazy. I opened the front door, but the dogs tried to get out. I had to quickly close it, and then I told them to back up. Meanwhile, I tell my little brother and sister to run outside while I hold the dogs. Once we're all outside, Jason tells me he had to go use the restroom. Again, I make sure to grab the dogs so they don't run off, and he heads inside. From here, I have Elizabeth wait in the car as I wait for Jason to return. 30 or 45 seconds after, I go over to the passenger seat to take off my shoes, since I wanted a break from wearing them. After, I go to buckle my sister's seatbelt, but that's when I hear the front door open. I now see Jason and the dogs running out of the house. You've gotta be kidding me. As if things couldn't get any worse, I say to myself. Which, side note, what I later learned made this slight inconvenience just an afterthought. In frustration, I yell at Jason, telling him he should have waited for me, since this was what I was trying to avoid to begin with. He apologized, and so he offers to assist me. At this point, Elizabeth jumps out of the car seat, and she begins running after Ruby, without her shoes. Now, let me just add something really quickly. When Ruby was a baby, she followed and protected Dottie where she went when she would run away, but now she only stays near the house, so she's pretty easy to get. Dottie, however, tends to run down the street, and she'll stay out until she's ready. This is why it was so hard to catch her. Anyways, I run after Elizabeth as Ruby runs over to her. When I get to both of them, I tell Elizabeth to wait in the car as I walk Ruby back into the house. While I'm inside the house, I tell my mom what's happening, and she told me we would be late if we didn't hurry. That was when I looked out the window, and I was able to see Dottie run past the house, heading down the street. I take off after her, while my mom looks after my siblings. I should mention that Dottie loves people, thus any time she sees someone, she goes running over to them. That's why I was on the lookout for a person, whether they be mowing the lawn or hanging out on their front porch. Dottie was sure to be with them. While I'm about to reach the bottom of a hill on our road, I saw Dottie heading into somebody's yard. Moments later, I see someone in the door to their garage, and I watch as they say something to someone who was inside the home. He then walks over to me. Now, mind you, I'm not the greatest when it comes to descriptions, but I'll give it my best. This man was about 5'7" and was a bit overweight. He had jeans and a white t-shirt and was slightly bald. My first thought wasn't exactly his looks, but more so, hey, here's this guy who could help me grab Dottie. But then I started to get this really bad feeling. I don't know how to best explain it, but it's like alarm bells were ringing in my head.
Hey, kid.
He exclaimed in a deep, creepy voice. Dottie, look, a person. Go over to him. Dottie, however, stays in place as she takes a glance over at the man, then to me, then to his backyard. It's almost as she was trying to tell me something. I take a step onto his lawn, and that's when I felt mud. In my rush to grab both Dottie and Ruby, I had forgotten my shoes.
So, your dogs got out. The pet bulls, right?
Another sign something was up. Dogs? As in more than one? How did he know that, along with the breed? Bear in mind, I'd never met this guy in my life. Yeah, my dogs got out. How do you know? I whispered back in confusion, voice trembling with paranoia.
Those are some nice jeans you have. I have a sweatshirt that would be perfect. Come inside. You can try them on.
Another alarm. All I had were some black jeans. Why was he suddenly excited for something as boring as that? I ignore his weird comment, and I started to walk back. The guy follows me. Not wanting to be rude, I tell him I had things to take care of.
Well, I have some cats that are missing. Could you keep a lookout for them and bring them to me?
I reluctantly agreed and run off with Dottie as the man continued to stare at me with a creepy smile as I looked back. Fast forward to after the meeting with the counselor. My mom and I are talking over some dinner, and I mentioned the encounter. Mom says, "How strange. Now that I think about it, there was a cat that was reported missing. Do you know where the cat's owner lives?" I curiously replied, "Sure. They live across the way, at the end of the block." I froze. The man I talked to lived nowhere near the cat's owner. We decided to let it go, thinking there had to be some innocent explanation. How I wish it was innocent. Later on, talking to my friends on the playground, one of them mentions how he learned of 2 registered offenders living in my neighborhood. This was later confirmed when I did some research of my own. Safe to say, I had stumbled into one of them, and had I decided to enter his home to try on that sweatshirt, things could have turned out a whole lot worse. Number 8. The Jumping Clown. I was around 14 years of age, and I was finally looking to earn some extra money. This was so I could go to the gas station and grab some chips or a soda, or anything my teenage self desired. Now, I had worked at the preschool my mom teaches at, and I did enjoy being around kids. It was exciting. I was essentially earning money to play and have fun. This was why I wanted to go ahead and start my own babysitting getup. I went ahead and worked on some posters, and I started to put them up around town. By the way, this was in 2016, in a small town known as Wrightwood, in California. Most people might not think much of that specific year, but if you've been around the internet long enough, you know this was the year of the clown sightings. Oh, what a fun time that was. Anyways, before I knew it, I had a babysitting job looking after a little boy, 3 years of age. The day arrived and I head over to their home, where the parents go over everything. Bedtime, allergies, food schedule, the typical. Soon they had left, and they promised me they'd be back no later than 8 p.m. "So, kiddo, Anything you want to do? I said, with a friendly and warm smile. I love to draw. Let's do that, he replied back, full of energy and innocence. Thankfully, thinking ahead, I take out a bunch of coloring books and crayons from my backpack. We then sat down at a table and we started to draw. I recall sketching some trees, thinking about my crush. Some time passes, and the kid hands me a picture that he drew. It was a clown. That's a really neat clown, I said, as I congratulated him with a high five. Thank you. He's actually the one who visits me at night. I'm guessing this is the clown from his dreams. I pondered silently as I met his eyes with a smile and an awe. Anyways, it's still light outside. You want to go jump on the trampoline? Yeah. He then spent the next while jumping, tumbling, and laughing. Before we knew it, the sun was setting, and I told him it was time to head inside. We now read some books until he eventually fell asleep on my lap. I then take him upstairs, and I put him in his cute red car bed. After, I head downstairs to watch some TV and work on some homework I brought along with me. There I was, relaxing, eating snacks, when I hear something outside. I listened for a few seconds, then I brushed it off as a squirrel. But then I recognized the noise. It was the trampoline. Bear in mind, this is a small town, so I assumed the only people who could possibly be jumping on it were kids. Either way, I wanted to go check things out. I head outside thinking I was going to tell some kids get off the trampoline, but I realized just how dark it had gotten. I walk over to the trampoline, and the next thing I knew, I went cold. Boy, how I wish it was just a couple of neighborhood kids. Instead, I see a clown with one of the creepiest masks I'd ever seen in my life. It had this unnatural smile on it, with a big red afro. I was left in shock, and I tried to be as quiet as I could while walking back into the home. Thankfully, I made it in without a single noise. I then locked the door, grabbed a kitchen knife, and I was now prepared for the worst. Not long after, I heard a loud bang coming from upstairs. My immediate thought was he climbed to the second story, then he broke in through a window. Quickly, I run upstairs, and to my absolute shock, I see the clown in the kid's bedroom. What I hear was something along the lines of the clown trying to convince the boy to go with him. Without the clown hearing me, I quickly grabbed the phone, and I finally revealed myself by screaming, "You need to get out of this house before the police get here." I was fuming with anger, but admittedly, I was also shaking with fear. The guy in the clown costume then screamed, and he jumped outside. I should note, this was from the second story. The dude seriously runs off without showing any sign of being hurt. My heart rate was super high, and within minutes police arrived and investigated. However, during the investigation, I must have passed out from being so scared because I awoke in the hospital some time later. They told me I had fainted. Since that day, I'm super frightened by just the sight of a clown. Even random noises in my home get to me. I've had other creepy things happen before, but this one definitely comes out on top as the worst. Number 9. Fred the Stalker. Oftentimes, I'll take a break from my studies, and I'll kick back to listen to some scary stories. Something about hearing people overcoming frightening situations is so satisfying. Thus, since I have time, I've gone ahead and written up one of my frightening encounters with a stalker. The issue has since been resolved, but let me go ahead and tell you all about it. This first started happening about 5 years ago, when I entered my first year of college. It was the first couple of weeks, and apart from being given assignments and books to read, my vision of the perfect college experience was starting off as a pretty boring one. It was during my math class I met Fred. Who is Fred, you might be wondering? Fred was this really awkward guy who sat by himself in the corner. Now, I'm not the most popular person, to be honest, but I usually love to make friends with everyone I could. It's just my personality trait. Anyways, my professor decided to put us into groups of 2 to work on a project. However, instead of choosing ourselves, he drew little pieces of paper with our names on them. I just so happened to be matched up with Fred. We worked on our math project together, and at the end, we ended up exchanging phone numbers. As for talking, it mainly stuck to a minimum. usually about class-related material and the occasional memes. After the semester ended, our text conversation slowly became a memory of the past. One day, however, he started to text me a bunch of lovey-dovey messages. He kept telling me how he missed me and how he wanted me to be his girlfriend. I wasn't interested as I was busy with schoolwork, but he kept insisting. This was why I started to ignore the messages, and they seemed to have stopped. I know, I should have just blocked them, but I really wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. Anyways, another time I was at the library, and I saw Fred at a table talking to a few other students. The 20 minutes I was there, I noticed them staring over at me and laughing. I tried not to think too much about it, until I heard one of them chuckle under their breath and say, "Wow, so she's your girlfriend, huh? You're so lucky." I actually had to do a double take, which was why I texted Fred later that day, and I told him, "Fred, what was this thing about your friend saying I was your girlfriend? That was a joke, right?" He took a couple of hours to say anything, but then later he responded with,
I thought we were boyfriend and girlfriend.
"Excuse me?" I questioned. Basically, he had made up this story of how I was playing hard to get and that we were secretly dating. I told him he needed to stop, otherwise I was going to tell someone about it. He apologized, and that seemed to have settled things down. One day, a friend of mine texted me a couple of screenshots revealing Fred's Instagram. Along with his posts about video games and comics, there were pictures of me. Most of them were taken from my Facebook, with some creepy captions. Things such as, "My one and only," and "My girlfriend is better than yours." I had all but enough at this point. I called them out on it, and I told them I was going to get police involved and that they were on their way. In actuality, I hadn't actually called them, since I wasn't sure there was much they could do, as he hadn't physically done a thing. That same night, something pretty creepy happened. It was around 2:30 in the morning, and I was in my dorm room studying. All of a sudden, I started to hear scratching in my window. Curious, I take a peek through the curtains, and to my surprise, it's Fred with a switchblade. And guess what he was doing? He was in the process of slashing the window screen, where presumably he was going to try and break in. Well, I called police. Meanwhile, he just stood there for a couple of minutes. I took the opportunity to film him so that I had evidence of his stalking. Finally, after 5 or so minutes, he walks off into the night, but that's not before he said something along the lines of,
I'll make you mine if it's the last thing I do.
With that, I presented all my evidence to police, along with my friend's testimony, and I was able to get a restraining order. That was pretty much the last I heard of Fred. Sorry for the anticlimactic ending. I know it's not super scary, but if you were in my shoes and you had some guy stalking you and trying to break into your dorm room in the middle of the night, you won't exactly be jumping for joy. Number 10. Hero Dad Saves Me. It was April of 2014, and I was a sophomore in junior college. This would put me at around 20 years old. I'm also pretty short and I look younger for my age, around 5'3", which was why I was oftentimes mistaken for a high schooler. Anyways, it was right after I'd gotten out of dance practice, and I was waiting for my mom to pick me up. Instead of waiting in the dance studio like all the others, I normally like to wait in the park that's right next to my school. I would grab a coffee from the nearby coffee store, then I would head to a picnic table. It's here I usually put on some music, and I got started on my homework. It had been no more than 20 minutes when my mom called saying she was stuck in traffic. Figured why it had been taking her so long. In the time she would get there, I would finish my homework, and I was now watching some videos to pass the time. It wasn't too long after I started watching a makeup tutorial video when I got a text from my friend Amy telling me to come over to her house because she was baking cookies. Amy read me like a book. She knew I loved baking, which was why I soon called my mother to advise her I would be heading to Amy's. By the way, Amy lived about a 10-minute walk from the dance studio, so I went ahead and put my things into my backpack, and I start the walk. However, before leaving the park, I had the urge to pee, which was why I went over to a nearby restroom. This is where one of the scariest encounters of my life would occur. Everything was going smoothly. I'd finished my business, washed my hands, and was just stepping out into the fresh air. Before I knew it, a hand was covering my mouth, and I was now pressed against someone. I struggled to leave the grasp of the stranger when a voice whispers into my ear and says something along the lines of,
"Stop moving and be quiet."
"You bet," I screamed and kicked like a lion, albeit voice being muffled by their hand. I finally looked up, and I was able to see an older man with a baseball hat and sunglasses smiling down at me. He then begins to effortlessly move me to the back of the building, when all of a sudden, a voice shouts, "What are you doing? Let her go!" The creep loosens his grip, caught red-handed, and I kick him in the shin, which causes him to lose his balance. Suddenly, the creep takes off, and this hero of a man who had just walked out of the restroom chases him away. I remember being in such shock, still crying and shaking by the time this man returns. He told me he was in the park with his wife and 2 kids, to which we walked over to sit with them. I then spent the next 15 minutes trying to calm my nerves as cops finally arrived to take our statements. They never did find him, and I just think that I was so close to being taken, but by some miracle, someone had seen and heard I was in trouble and saved me. Number 11. Babysitting Home Intruder. I've been listening to your channel for a couple of weeks now, and I just remembered a creepy story of mine after watching your most recent Home Alone Stories video. It was raining this evening, about a year ago, and I was babysitting a couple of the neighborhood kids. It wasn't anything too crazy, as I'd looked after them plenty of times in the past. Besides, they loved me, and I still look after them today. Anyways, the kids were in the living room watching SpongeBob or something, and I was warming up the food their mom had left. It was chicken Alfredo pasta with some salad on the side. Honestly, just thinking about it makes me hungry. But I digress. Once I'd prepared their plates, I walk over to the living room to sit with the kids and enjoy dinner. However, I don't make it far, because suddenly I'm interrupted with their screams. "Hey kiddos, what's wrong? Did the lightning scare you? Miss Megan, were you outside just now?" One of them said, with a sense of urgency, on the verge of crying. "No, kiddo, I've been in here the whole time making your food. What's wrong?" I respond, with a reassuring motherly tone. "We saw somebody. They were looking through the window. We got scared and we thought it was you." I sort of freaked out, but then I remembered these two always liked to play pranks with me. That's why I didn't really take their statement as a serious one. Besides, when I looked out the window, I was unable to see anything. "Ha ha, very funny. Now let's eat." My response seemed to have calmed the tension in the room as we now sat down and enjoyed the food. Fast forward about 30 minutes later, it's around 9:45 p.m., and the kids had head upstairs to brush their teeth and head to bed. Finally, having some peace and quiet, I'm now washing the dishes and talking to my friends over a group chat. "I can't wait to get home so we can play PlayStation. Any games you guys have in mind?" I texted them as we try to come up with our evening entertainment. This back and forth goes on for roughly 5 minutes, when all of a sudden, I am able to hear what sounds like a window being opened. Stunned by the noise, I walk over to the living room, thinking one of the kids had gotten up. "Hey, shouldn't you two be asleep?" I wasn't able to finish my sentence, because now standing in the living room, clothing drenched from the downpour, was a man in a dirty old trench coat, along with a large hunting knife. I remember struggling to get any words out as the man began to stumble and walk toward me menacingly. I knew at this moment this guy was looking to leave no witnesses, so I did the only thing I could think of. I run over to the kitchen and I head to grab my purse. It's in here. I have a taser and even some pepper spray. And just so you know, I had never used any of those two in the 2 years I'd gotten them from my dad. Anyways, The man yells at me and tells me to stop as I get ready to defend myself. "Don't come any closer. Please. Just leave." I struggled to get out as my voice trembled and sweat began to fall down my brow. The man suddenly lunges and I fire the taser, connecting on his neck. The guy then falls to the ground screaming, and I quickly head upstairs to get the kids. They were fast asleep, so what a surprise they were in for when they heard my panicked voice. "I need you two to hide under the bed, okay? Don't cry. I need you two to be brave for me. Can you do that?" Again, they had no clue as to the danger we were in. Nonetheless, I call 911, and soon police are arriving, where they find the man hiding in the basement, taser dart still attached to him. That was essentially the end to this, and let's just say I had quite a lot of explaining to do to the parents when they arrived about an hour later. Edit. Yes, the person the kids had seen in the window was the same man who broke in. They were able to confirm this later on. Number 12. Catman. Just a quick note from myself, the narrator, the Creepy Fox. This is a story that was sent in from a good subscriber friend of mine named Dave. It was emailed over to me June 7th, 2017. Now, I know most of you are newer around here, and you never got a chance to hear my old narrations from 2017. So, I thought I would go ahead and include this one. To Dave, if you're still around and listening to my videos, then thank you. As for everybody else, here is a classic story from 2017 Creepy Fox that is going to chill you to the bone. Hello everyone, my name is Dave, and I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. If, for whatever reason, there's people listening to this that are from that area, then I'm sure you know about the Catman of Four Corners. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Is there a guy roaming around that's half cat or something? Or is this some sort of urban legend told by parents and adults to scare kids from staying out late? As much as that would make a plot for one of those cheap indie films, that's not the case. He is, in fact, a real person. The first time I remember encountering him was when I was a kid, sometime in the early 1990s. Now, okay, you're probably wondering, why was he dubbed the Catman of Four Corners? Well, it's because the guy would hiss and meow at people. I even remember his teeth. It looked like he had fangs. Oh, and I can't forget the tattoo he has between his eyes. It's like a paw print. Anyways, he has been this way for many years. He never bothers you about money or extra change, but he does argue a lot to himself. I can even recall this one occasion. I remember I was minding my own business walking around when I noticed him in a phone booth by a very popular convenience store. It took me a second to realize just how strange it was. Not because he was talking inside the phone booth, but because that phone booth had ceased its telecommunication abilities for years. I guess that's just my fancy way of saying the phone booth hadn't been working. Basically, the guy was talking to thin air. Something else about him was that he had been arrested on multiple occasions, mainly for being intoxicated in public, and there's this one time he clawed someone's face. That was why it had been a while since I last saw him. Now that we're caught up with his misdoings, I bring us to an encounter I had with him. It was one normal afternoon with my friends, and we had been hanging out. For some dumb reason, we decided to get a can of cat food and spend the next hour walking around downtown trying to find the man. We almost gave up, but sure enough, we had stumbled upon him. This was when we showed him the food, and one of my friends barked, because, normal teenagers acting immature. Safe to say, he grew angry from the remark and chased after my friends and I. Running for a few minutes, we were able to find a safe haven inside a local McDonald's, where, luckily, there were some police officers inside enjoying their Big Macs. Unfortunately for one of my friends, he fell, where the man proceeded to jump on said friend, and no joking, bit him. The cops noticed and were able to intervene, and in summary, he was once again intoxicated, and he was taken into custody. As for my friend, he was taken to the hospital, where he made a full recovery. So, if there's any advice I would give you, don't mess with people, because you never know how they're going to react. By the way, he still roams the area. Number 13. The Creepy Phone Calls. My story, at least I believe, is a bit more of an oddity than it is scary. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is creepy, but I could never quite figure out why this happened to me. Every friend I talk to says they've never heard of something like this occurring. Therefore, I wanted to share my story with the world so that perhaps I can see if somebody else has experienced this. This first started happening when I was about 15 years old. We're talking about 2006. It was summertime, finally a break from the studies, and I took this relaxation period to play video games and watch TV. I can still remember watching Jerry Springer and thinking, wow, I'm so edgy watching a show that's TV-14. Anyways, it was during the summer break the phone calls would begin. I remember it started with the phone ringing every day at around 3:30 p.m. Normally, it was a variation of the hour. Sometimes it was 3:30, other times it was 3:25 or 3:20. I normally let the calls go to voicemail, which would be nothing but static. Sometimes there was just silence. One day I had grown annoyed at the calls, so I eagerly awaited the ringing of the phone. Without missing a beat, I answered the phone around 3:30 p.m., in which I met with heavy breathing. The breathing definitely sent chills down my spine, so I hung up the phone, but almost immediately, the phone rings again. Thus, I answer it. This is where, for the very first time, I'm actually met with a voice. Now, I don't remember the exact wording, but it was a very deep voice, and it was something along the lines of,
Why did you hang up, beautiful? Nice purple pajamas you're wearing, by the way.
I freaked out, and I remember my skin turning pale. Indeed, I did have purple pajamas on, as I normally stayed in them the whole day. After all, I never left the comfort of my cool air conditioning home, unless I was going to go out with my friends. Now, really quickly, where I answered the phone, there is a medium-sized window directly behind me in the living room. I was in the hallway in front of it. Something else of note is we had really cheap curtains. They were almost see-through. You wouldn't be able to see details of somebody standing outside, but you were able to see their silhouettes. Well, I quickly turned around, and I just so happened to catch the outline of someone running away. Footsteps echoed on the pavement as I quickly run over to see who it was. Sadly, by the time I'm looking out the front lawn, I see the backside of somebody in a trench coat running into the nearby forest that surrounds my neighborhood. As you might expect, I was so creeped out I ended up calling the cops. After giving them details, they told me they would have an officer patrol the area and keep a lookout for me. Officers then spent the next couple of days driving around my neighborhood at odd hours of the day and night, but things seemed to have settled. The man in the trench coat seemed to have become nothing but a distant memory. That was until roughly 5 months later in the winter. I was once again home alone, but this time things were a bit different. For one, we had just gotten a German Shepherd, and for two, my friend Jessica was spending the night with me. We were up watching movies, and it must have been around 1 a.m. During our movie marathon, we heard the phone ringing. Naturally, it spooked us, as we had been watching scary movies. I thought perhaps it might have been my parents checking up on me, maybe from their business trip, I thought. Then I remembered they had just called a few hours ago, saying they were going to go to sleep. Jessica and I ignored the phone, as it grows silent. 10 minutes later, however, we heard what sounded like glass shattering, which was followed by my dog barking. My dog then suddenly took off, as Jessica and I slowly and quietly tiptoed behind, using the cover of darkness to keep hidden. What happens next was what sounded like a metal rod hitting the floor, and then footsteps storm out of my home as my dog's barking grows distant. Once again, myself, along with Jessica, saw a figure run toward the forest. My dog returned moments later, and we were left to assess the damage. Not only was there a rusty metal rod laying on the ground, but one entire part of the sliding glass door was completely shattered. Luckily, my dog must have noticed the potential hazard as he jumped over it when chasing the intruder. I called police, and they did another search of the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the nearby forest. They, unfortunately, were unable to find him, and just like that, things went quiet. To this day, whoever broke in and made those phone calls has never returned, nor has been caught. Edit. For those wondering, we ended up moving from that city less than a year later, not because of the incident, but because my mom and dad had gotten better job opportunities in another state. I still believe to this day that that was a blessing in disguise. Number 14. All that for a ring? About 8 years ago, I ended up moving from my small town in Northern California all the way to Fairbanks, Alaska. Quite a change of scenery, as you might imagine. Reason why I moved was due to an ex who had been stalking me for months. Luckily, I had an aunt and uncle who lived in Fairbanks, and I figured this could be a nice change. So, what was once my life of sunny skies, ocean breeze, with temperatures averaging 70 to 85, was now a cooler minus 15 to 20 degrees. By the way, that's on a good day. More average, it tends to get below minus 30, at least during the winter. Summer is a little bit more reasonable, however, as temperatures hover around the 50-degree mark. Now, even though those details aren't too important, I mention them because during the winter, it's always dark. Yes, the stories of darkness in Alaska are very true. Sunlight only appears for 4 hours, and the rest of the day is you trying to fight cabin fever. This was what made my job at a small mom-and-pop coffee shop a bit more manageable. The fact I was able to see people and interact with them is what stopped me from going crazy. Anyways, it wasn't even a month into this new job when I started to recognize the locals and the customers. For the most part, creeps were far in between, as most people would greet you with a polite smile and a hello. One man in particular, however, decided to go one step beyond, and not to make my life better, but a living nightmare. I recall it had been a slower than usual day, and I was by myself cleaning some of the espresso machines. There were only 2 other patrons who were reading some books. While I was occupied, a man called me over wanting to order a drink. I walk over and give him my usual greeting. He responds with his order, and I ring him up. So far, so good. But then, he started to make some comments.
I've never seen you around here. Are you new? Maybe you'd like to go out with me for a ride around town. I can show you all the great spots. We can even get some dinner.
Bear in mind, this guy was easily in his mid-50s. He looked like a delivery driver, and he had the look too. Large, dirty overalls, messy brown hair, stubble, standing around 6'3", weighing somewhere around 270, 280 pounds. No, I think I'm going to be okay. Thank you, though. I appreciate it. I replied back to him, tried my best to be polite. The guy wasn't taking no for an answer, and he kept telling me that it was his treat, going further to say he would buy me anything I wanted. As a 23-year-old college student, that might sound appealing, but I wasn't, and still am not dumb. Again, I told him I wasn't interested, and this sent him into a fit. He started cursing at me and calling me names, which caught the attention of the 2 gentlemen who were sitting at the nearby table. Remember the ones I mentioned just a bit ago? Well, they were brothers who owned a bakery who often came here to read and drink coffee. Basically, they were able to assist me with getting the guy to leave, but it wasn't before the man threw over a couple of the coffee displays. Now you would think this was just a one-time deal, some guy trying his best to go for a college girl and not getting his way. How I wish I could wrap up my story, however. A couple of weeks went by, and there was no sign of him. This time around, I was closing the store, and I was in the process of locking the front door. As I had my back turned to the parking lot, I started to hear the sound of snow crunching. I turned around thinking somebody was walking over to the video rental store next to me, but instead, I'm shocked to see it's the gentleman from a few weeks ago. It was in this moment I realized he wasn't going to the video rental store, as it had closed over 2 hours ago. I got the chills, as before I could say anything, he takes out a knife from his back pocket. My heartbeat suddenly rose to 100 miles an hour as I quickly struggled to get back into the store. The man then tries to put his hand through the gap of the door, but I manage to slam it shut on him. He retreats his arm, and I'm able to lock myself in. The thing is, I still wasn't out of this mess. He was so angry, he started to kick at the door. It's like he was doing everything in his power to get to me. Well, I hit the alarm as I soon called the local Fairbanks Police Department. By the time they got there, he had gotten away. Luckily, a nearby security camera had caught him, along with the license plate of his vehicle. Here's the funny part. A few days later, police had arrested him after he attempted to rob a jewelry store. I later found out that he wanted to get me the most expensive ring they had so that I could, and I quote, become his wife. Yeah, robbing a jewelry store to do that? Nope, that wasn't going to happen. No, thank you. Number 15. Creepy Gym Stalker. To give you reference, I'm 15 years old, male, and about 6'1", 160 pounds. Obviously, I'm not the most intimidating person in the world, say in comparison to an adult. I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood that's very populated. There's also a YMCA across the street from me. This is where I'll be focusing a majority of my retelling. Anyways, I'm on the basketball team, and I usually go there 4 to 5 times a week. This day the creepy encounter happened was a week ago, on Monday. Mondays are normally my weightlifting days, and this day was no different. I can recall the gym being extra busy, which meant I had to wait my turn in order to get to the bench press. So there I was standing around warming up with some of the lighter weights when I noticed someone. He was pretty tall, around 6'3", in his 40s, wearing all blue dirty clothes. Something about him made me a bit uncomfortable as he kept staring at people. Assuming he was just waiting his turn to use the weights, I think nothing of him. Finally, after being patient enough, the bench opens and I start to make my way over. But then one of my friends sees me and he says, "Hey bro, you mind if you spot me?" I agreed and leave the bench. Returning has me see someone using it. I'm pretty annoyed, so I grab some dumbbells to loosen my arms up when I notice the man from earlier, the one with all the blue, who was just looking at people. He was staring right at me. I noticed him because the gym had a big mirror. Actually, I don't know of any gym that doesn't have one. This was why I was able to see through the reflection. When I turn, he looks away and he returns back to whatever it was he was doing. I found it strange, but I calmed my nerves by reminding myself people always stare at you in the gym. But this ended up changing as in between another set, I felt heavy eyes over my shoulders. Sure enough, I'm able to once again see him staring. This time, however, he doesn't do the cowardly turn and walk the other direction. He owns up to being caught red-handed, and he starts making his way over to me. I wasn't really sure what this guy was up to, so I take out one of my earphones and I drop the weights.
Hello there.
Hi. What's up?
Those are some pretty heavy weights you've got. Are you sure you can handle them on your own?
Nah, it's not heavy. Thanks for the concern. I make something up about how I was okay with the weight, and he walks away. I did find his approach somewhat off. I mean, I do look a bit older for my age, so perhaps he was just trying to start a friendly conversation. At last, after waiting for what seemed like an eternity, the bench opens up, and I go to set my weight, disregarding the man. Once I was done with my set, I take a minute or two to catch my breath and let my muscles relax. I then take the moment to look through Instagram and Snapchat. I then completed another set within the next couple of minutes, and when I look up, I see Blue Clothes Man looking right at me. He was just standing there and staring. Getting unnerved, I raise the volume up on my music, and I get back to weightlifting. However, as I'm about to lift, one side of the bar falls to the side. I found it odd as I just used it a few minutes ago. I look up yet again and I ended up getting my answer. The creep had messed with the weight. Dude could have seriously injured me. Regardless, he offers to spot me, and I tell him absolutely not with the most frustrated and annoyed tone I could muster. I've had all but enough for one evening. Here I was trying to get my workout, and have this guy seriously getting on my nerves. I finish the set, and then I run over to the locker room. But just my luck, the gym was jam-packed, but the locker room was an absolute ghost town. I wasn't really feeling comfortable showering here alone, so I decided just to change. Of course, I happened to hear a door open, and my paranoid self almost had a panic attack because the same guy from before enters. I was hoping he hadn't seen me, but of course, he does.
Hello again. I was looking for you.
Now, I've been listening to scary stories for quite some time, and one thing I always notice is the way people act. They'll try to gain your trust by being nice and offering you everything, but I wasn't falling for that routine. Look, man, I just want to go home. It's been a long day and I just want to jump in the shower and do my homework so I can go to bed. If you really want to talk, can it wait for another day? Obviously, I wasn't looking to converse with this creep ever again. Thank goodness somebody walks into the locker room as he was about to respond to my rebuttal. I take the opportunity to move past him, trying to get as far away as possible. I was now out of the YMCA, heading home, and I have not seen any sign of him. I was almost at a traffic light when I noticed a car drive beside me ever so slowly. Now, something I should mention about this intersection is just how slow the light takes to turn to crossing. Seriously, I could cook an egg on the street on a hot summer's day and have it be ready by the time I was ready to go. Oh, and because why not? There is the fact these street lights are very dim. While most of the city has upgraded the light bulbs in their street lamps, my side of town still used those old dim ones. This was what made the night even more darker. Either way, the car drives up to the traffic stop, and it's signaling to turn to the right, where I'm supposed to go. Now, anyone who drives know that if you're planning to turn right on a red light, go right ahead. No one's stopping you, just as long as there's no cars approaching. This person decided that they weren't going to do that, as they stayed stationary. I take the moment to look through the window, and what I could see was somebody staring directly at me. I make the connection. It was the guy from the gym. Finally, the light changes, and I run as fast as I could, trying to get to the safety of my home. The vehicle turned after I crossed, and it began to make its way down the street, of course, heading toward me. I run to the other side where my house was, and the car passes me ever so slowly. Out of breath and on the verge of passing out, I'm finally in my home, where I proceeded to lock every door and window. Bear in mind, it's around 9 p.m., and my parents had already went to bed as they had to be up early for work. Sadly for me, we had no blinds for any of our windows, and to make matters worse, there was a ginormous window in the living room. This acted as the main hub of our home. I made my way downstairs to my bedroom, shutting the door behind me in the process. Then, just like clockwork, I kid you not, the rain started to come. It was calm at first. Then, all of a sudden, this huge, powerful rain cell made its presence known, as I am able to hear the raindrops hit the windows. I can remember sitting there in my bed, telling myself that it was finally over, but then to my surprise, I hear the distinct sound of car tires against our gravel driveway. I knew it wasn't my parents, as their car was already here. Anyways, next I hear the car's engine come to a shushed halt. I'm now waiting for the car door to open or close, but there's nothing. Maybe it was one of my mom or dad's friends. Very dumb thinking, I know, but I was doing all I could to calm my nerves. It couldn't have been that the guy was following me, could it have? I tiptoed my way upstairs regardless, and I get the courage to look through the big window. This was where I'm able to see him walking around our front lawn. He spots me, and he runs over to our front door. Naturally, I freaked out, and I started to head toward my dad to wake him up. I can even remember the sound of the door handle moving as I shout I was getting my parents. Finally, I hear footsteps run off our front porch as my dad finally drifts out from his sleeping slumber. By the time we head downstairs, the man drove away, never to be seen or heard from again. Number 16. This took place just a couple of years ago. I'm talking about 2018. Being shy of 20 years old, I lived in a pretty peaceful and beautiful locale in Colorado. I have a small dog who I would often take out on walks throughout my daily routines. However, there was one day I'd gotten really busy, so I was only able to walk my dog once during the day. This would mean I would make the evening my choice for our second stroll. Unfortunately, my change of schedule ended up having me dealing with a creepy person. Now, for whatever dumb reason, most of the streetlights in our block hadn't been working because, that's just my luck. As a result, I brought along my own flashlight. Now, considering I'd never heard of crimes or any sort of misfortunes occurring near me, I assumed walking at this hour would be safe. Anyways, we reached the end of my block, turned left, and started to head toward my neighbor's mailboxes. We are roughly 200 feet away when my flashlight shines onto the road next to the sidewalk. This was where I could see a suspicious man standing there with a beanie and a gray hoodie jacket. He looked at me while holding a box, I would say the size of a laptop or small computer. In the other hand was a pocket knife. I couldn't be too certain if that's what it was, however, since my flashlight wasn't great at longer distances. I yelled and I ran as fast as I could until I got home. Once there, I locked the door behind me, where my mom greets me with a concerned look. Once she was caught up with the details, we called the police, and they did a quick search of the surrounding neighborhoods. They never did find him, and I became so paranoid I wasn't able to sleep that evening. My best guess was he was wanting to wait until nightfall, that way he could go out and steal packages. I truly believe, even after all this time, he was concerned I would have found out what he was doing. Thank goodness I never have seen him again, and I used that creepy encounter to become more self-aware of my surroundings. Number 17. Hide and Go Seek with the Masked Man. The person who sent this story to me has told me they want to remain anonymous. Sorry it's taken so long to get to your story. I hope you enjoy the narration, and leave a comment telling me what you thought. It was the summer of 2012, and I was 10 years of age. This was during a time I would always be outside playing with my friends. I was very close to a couple of the neighbors. For the sake of anonymity, we're going to name them Sam and Jack. Also, my brother was a part of this encounter. We're going to name him Noah. Noah is just a couple of years younger than me, but that didn't stop him from joining us on our misadventures. Now, I was the only girl in the group, which was kind of a bummer. But even so, I stood my own. I think that's why I got along with everybody. By the way, in order from oldest to youngest, it was Sam, Jack, myself, then Noah. This afternoon we were playing Manhunt, and we split up into teams. In one corner, it was Sam and I, taking on the team of Jack and Noah. I was very good at hiding, thus I knew I wasn't going to be found easily. I also had the benefit of it being very dark and cold throughout this mildly cool July. Also, did I forget to mention I wasn't afraid of the dark? While most people my age would avoid any mention of playing out in the woods in complete darkness, I welcomed it with open arms. Anyways, first up to hide was both myself and Sam. We had a pretty good strategy going. Don't hide together, as to make the game last longer. Luckily, since we do live next to one another, we were going to use both of our yards, which were connected by a path in the woods. So I decided my hiding spot was going to be in Sam and Jack's backyard. You see, they have a deck with some patio chairs, and right next to it is a grill for cooking. I decided to hide in the little opening between said grill and deck. You might be wondering, why here? Well, you curious person, it's because they wouldn't be able to see me, since the grill covers me from sight. The best part of it is I'm able to see if anybody is approaching through the little peephole. Gosh, I don't remember how long it must have been, but during the search, I heard a couple of them walk by me, but try as they did, they weren't able to locate me. Eventually, I was able to hear they had found Sam, and now the three had teamed up to locate the hiding champion, me. Here's the deal. They decided to head to my yard, as they assumed they had already checked every spot in this one. A few minutes went by, and to my surprise, I see the faint outline of what looks to be like a man standing in the tree line, no more than 100 feet away. This was for the very first time in the game I'd even noticed his presence. I had to do a double take, and for some dumb reason, I think to calm my nerves, I called out, "Hello? Is somebody out there?" I said out loud, hoping my imagination was getting the best of me. Sure enough, it was a man, and I could see them stare into my general direction. I was hoping he was going to leave, but instead he started to walk over to the grill. Just my luck. At this moment, I started to freak out that I jumped out of my hiding spot, catching him off guard. This gave me an opportune ability to flee from the potential danger. But here's the weird part. Halfway through the woods that connects to our homes, I take a look behind me, but the stranger from just moments ago is just staring. It's like he was in some sort of dreamlike state. He hadn't snapped out of it. Finally, I caught up with the guys and I told them about the man. Yeah, right. No one's out here but us. You're crazy. They weren't believing a single thing I was saying. Obviously, there was no way I was returning to see if our new stranger friend was still waiting for me. Thus, I went inside to get my father. In return, he grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and spent the next few minutes walking around the woods, checking to see if any suspicious individual had been walking about. He comes up empty-handed. Now, I don't know if it's because of the indefinite conclusion or because I started to lose my fear and grow more curious, but I ended up sneaking out of the house with a flashlight. I wanted to prove to my friends and brother I wasn't going crazy. While we're searching the woods, we suddenly grow cold when we hear branches snapping and leaves being stepped on. We couldn't believe it, but there was movement coming from just behind us. I quickly turn around and I illuminate the woods behind me. With a poor cover of trees, I was able to see somebody's arm sticking out. Obviously, we were being followed. This was when I get the smart idea of grabbing the nearest rock and hurling it toward that tree. The person hiding jumps out from cover, and we're left with a sight we could never forget. There is a man, easily 6 feet tall, wearing a ski mask, gray hoodie, and ripped jeans. The clothes aren't really a huge detail to be afraid of, but more so the switchblade he had. We scream like the kids we were, and we run as fast as we could to Sam and Jack's house. As we recovered our breath inside their home from the sprint and the scare of our lives, we explained to their mother who we had seen. Officers showed up no more than 5 minutes later, but sadly, after doing a search, they find no one. Noah and I went home, but we had trouble sleeping. After all, can you blame us after being out in the woods and being followed by some guy in a ski mask holding a blade? In summary, it's an experience that still creeps me out till this day. By the way, we have never seen him again. Before we get to the last story, I wanted to say thank you very much for making it this far. Remember, if you'd like to see more, including sneak peeks, as well as exclusives, then make sure to be following me over on my Instagram, @TheCreepyFoxOfficial. This way, you're able to keep up to date with everything I'm doing. Lastly, make sure to check out the new merch. You can check it out right below the video player or by following the link in the description below. Thank you. Now, let's get on to the final story. Number 18. Masked Home Intruder. It was the summer of 2016, and I was starting a new life, so to speak. My family and I just finished the process of moving to a brand new house. This happening just a short while after my stepfather's passing. As you might imagine, moving into a new neighborhood meant I knew absolutely no one. One evening, I think it was July, my mom went out with a couple of her friends. Here's the thing with my mother. She was so saddened and indecisive since my stepfather's passing, I had to keep cheering her on, telling her she deserved to get out of the sadness for a bit. Going out with her friends and being around positive energy was what I kept trying to put inside her head. "We'll be fine, Mom. Go out. Have some fun with your friends," I reassured her, telling her we would be okay. Turned out that wasn't the case. Things would take a turn for the terrifying. Now, I was 14 during that year, and I was left to look after my 2 younger siblings. We will call them Zoe and Steve. Steve was 12, and Zoe was 10. I'd actually taken care of them plenty times in the past, so this was honestly just another common routine. Anyways, my mom said she would be back no later than 11 p.m. It was 10 p.m., and Steve and I were sitting on the couch with some popcorn, getting our scary movie marathon going. Meanwhile, Zoe had already gone to bed no more than 30 minutes ago. Now, we both love scary movies, and this time, we were watching the Scream trilogy. It's in between our scares and enjoyment. My dog started to whine. This was usually an indication he had to go pee. "Steve, could you pause the movie? I don't want to miss the good part, I instructed him as I go to grab the leash. Once we were outside, he pees, and now he was just sniffing the lawn, walking back and forth. Buster, are you done? Come on, we gotta go back inside, I called out to him. Here's the bizarre part. Normally, I would call to Buster, and he would come running to me super affectionate. However, instead, he looks up. Then he started to growl into the nearby darkness. Strange, but then he runs towards something just out of sight. My immediate thought was a bear. They tend to roam around my neighborhood during this time of year, so I was pretty scared. Here's the thing. I was also able to see something completely black in my peripheral vision as it made its way around my house. I was able to convince myself it was definitely a bear. I grabbed Buster, heart pounding with adrenaline and all, run inside, and then slam the door shut. Hey, what's up with you? Why are you acting so crazy? My brother replied as I placed Buster down. Oh, it was just a bear. I didn't mean to scare you. I tried to forget about our grisly visitor as we continue watching the movie. It's now 30 minutes to midnight, and Mom still hasn't arrived. By this point, Steve had turned in for the evening, and I popped in another movie. Fast forward another couple of hours, and it's past 1 a.m. This was when I started to hear what sounded like knocking around my house. Convinced I was becoming paranoid with all these scary movies, I decided to switch over to watching some cartoons. Then, I had the urge to go pee. Here's the thing with my restroom. It's small. I'm not even joking. It also has a sunroof in it. Normally, this detail wouldn't be worth a mention, but how could I not forget seeing someone looking through the roof, wearing all black? I let out a scream, and this guy straight up booked it and disappeared. Hello? Hello? I need officers here, right away. There's someone trying to get into my house, I anxiously expressed over the phone to the police. While I'm trying to get a hold of myself, I remember hearing the front door knob being messed with. Thankfully, it was locked, but then a light switched on in my head. I hadn't locked the back door, and there was no way in hell I was going to run back to the other side of the house with the lights on. With police being no more than 5 minutes from my home, I grabbed a fire poker, then I grabbed Buster, and head toward my siblings, locking us in a closet in the bedroom. Poor kiddos were so scared, I had to cover their mouths and beg them not to scream. They were crying, and I'll admit I was on the verge of tears myself. But just when things seemed to have settled, we hear the distinct sound of the bedroom door opening, and that's when Zoe let out a cry. This was followed by pounding at the closet door, where seconds later it opens, and standing in front of us was an absolute giant. I'm talking about a man easily 6'5", weighing easily over 200 pounds. He was covered completely in black, with a ski mask covering his identity. By some miracle, the sound of police sirens began to echo down our neighborhood, and this was when the guy looked at the four of us, then said,
"You're going to regret ever calling the cops on me."
He then smashes our window and jumps outside. With police finally arriving, I embraced my siblings as we run over to the police. We told them everything that happened, down to every last detail. Buster chasing after someone, myself hearing knocks around the house, and finally seeing somebody on top of our home. Unfortunately, he was never caught. Well now, those were quite the creepy experiences, wouldn't you say? Most definitely. But hey, you've reached the bonus part of the video, the part where I wanted to go ahead and talk to all of you. It's been a while. Actually, when this video goes up, it would have been almost 3 weeks since the last upload. Now, those of you who follow me over on my Instagram, you already saw what I was up to. Yes, that's right, friends. If you couldn't tell by the background footage, I was up in Alaska filming, and let me tell you, what a grand old time. From playing in the snow to revisiting some old locations from past videos, it was quite exciting to be filming in the last frontier. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and play some of the footage. It includes some talking, and even some parts I appeared on camera. Now, if you like this sort of thing, then let me know down below. I really want to start appearing more on camera and even talking to all of you. Honestly, I feel like it gives this channel its own unique flavor. But anyways, let's see what I had to say. I'm gonna regret this later on, aren't I? But you know what? I love it. It's wonderful. As you can see, there is no traffic. So when you're walking down roads and streets here up in Anchorage, well, you don't have to really worry, because if we turn around, you're gonna see that the streets are
completely empty.
So this is just one of the many neighborhoods here in, well, Anchorage, Alaska, as you can already tell. Pretty dead, pretty quiet. You know, there's not really much going on here. Right now, during January, we only get about 4 to 5 hours of sunlight. The sun's going to be going down soon, and it will not come up again until 10:30 the next day. It's a beautiful day for jogging here in Hope, Alaska. So I did a cut really quickly so you missed all the boringness of us walking. Come and take a look inside the cabin in here. You're gonna see it's completely empty. So go ahead and check that out. Get some footage in there, show the viewers at home just how completely abandoned this is. Whew! So yeah, check that out. To think people actually lived inside of these cabins. I'm ready for a good old time here in Hope, Alaska. Get a couple drinks in me, get some hot chocolate, get some, I don't know, some bread, something. We'll be good to go. Well, that's gonna be it for Hope, Alaska. I hope you enjoyed this little tour back here in this historic little town. We'll probably do that. I can't speak as how cold it is. Woo! Probably be back sometime in the future, but like I said, I wanted to come back and show you all this little town in a different time of the year. I hope you enjoyed the little tour, and I'll see you all in Seward, Alaska in a couple of hours. Taking a look into downtown Seward in just a bit, but for right now we are on the outskirts, checking out the water, checking out the mountain and everything. There's a couple birds in the water brave enough to be swimming around. Well, I'm sure they're nice and insulated with their feathers and everything. I definitely would not want to be inside that water because I can already imagine it is pretty cold. Oh yeah, there's a car. Awesome. So there's just a little bit. Next video, I'll go ahead and show you a little bit more. So make sure to stay tuned for that. The last thing I wanted to go over was the upload schedule. Once again, I've entered the slow season at Disneyland, which means I'll have a lot more time to interact with all of you. So expect to see more frequent videos, at least until the end of March or early April. That's when things will pick up again. Nevertheless, friends, that's going to be it from me. As always, thank you so much for spending time with me. I'll talk to you all in the next video. But until then, take care and have yourself an amazing day.